Hi, welcome to the Poultry Keepers Podcast. I'm Rip Stalvey, and together with Mandelyn Royal and John Gunnerman, we're your co-hosts for this show, and it's our mission to help you have a happy, healthy, and productive flock. Mandelyn Royal joined us tonight, and we are going to be talking about American Bresse. Isn't that right, Mandelyn?
Absolutely. There's a lot to go into with them because they've been around for a pretty long time, just not in the US for very long.
I just started to say I think they've been around a lot longer than most folks realize. Where are they from?
Originally, they're from France, and like a lot of poultry breeds where they are named for the region they came from, the Bresse are from the Bresse region, and there's a whole lot of history and methods in how they're grown there, and a lot of different variations within. There's also different varieties. There's actually a lot to it. So I don't know how deep you want me to go into the French side of all their history or
Well, go
move
into it.
on to how they're important to
We
it.
don't have to get hung up on it, but yeah, give us a little detail there.
So most common in the US is the white breast, and that's not the first variety that came later on. The colors that we don't have here officially right now is like the gray breast, and that was where they started from. And there's also black, which of course means there's blue and splash as well. And there's a red gold too. And they each have their own name. They're named differently for their specific regions over in France. So you can't say all the different colors are the same breast. They all have their own more specialty breed names.
I'm curious, what attracted you to Bresse to begin with?
The very first time I had actually heard about them was through an advertisement I saw. And so I looked up the name and I was surprised by what I found and I was intrigued. And with what they were saying for the dual purpose qualities, that's where I was in my flock development, was trying to do that transition into dual purpose. And I had been having a hard time really seeing both meat and eggs from one breed. Like it was not going well. And after I saw that ad for them, I reached out to the lady and I talked to her for a while, and I ended up getting some chicks and eggs from her.
Hmm.
And what I had read about actually turned out to be mostly true with that first group. So I thought they were pretty incredible right out of the gate. And now we can process at 14, 16 weeks, and they've been a lot of fun to breed up and improve and work on the standard. Uh, It's been a lot of fun with them, and it's the yield that really made it more enjoyable because I didn't have to stress about a cockerel management program. They just go to the freezer if you have too many.
I'm curious, and I know you deal with this on a regular basis, but what are some of the traits to look for if somebody's wanting to start out with this breed?
If you're actually going to have them for the dual purpose qualities, especially the table qualities, you want to find something that has their bloodline bred for growth rate and the fleshing and the body structure, body capacity, all those important things for overall production. They need that in their family so that you get a more consistent and reliable table presentation. And because we're not eating the top shelf best breeding stock birds, we're eating the ones who didn't quite turn out as great as how their parents were. And those to me still need to be like a meaningful bird in some capacity. So that growth rate and the fleshing, it was the most elusive thing when I was trying a lot of different breeds, and these had that. So I've been terrified of losing it by making the wrong breeding decisions. So getting that growth rate predictable, that's
But
pretty
you've been
important.
working to improve that, right?
Yeah, but they had it pretty well though. They weren't far off the mark when I got started with them. At least in the batch that I started with. I've tried some groups from some other places and it varied tremendously in what you could expect from those offspring. So that's where I started to learn just how diverse that flock is, because every farm almost has a different kind of growth rate, a different kind of look to the bird. They're not very consistent yet. So that's why we started working on a standard for them in the US to try to be like, there's a way these birds are supposed to look and grow and perform. And standards help keep everybody on the same page.
Yeah. Sue Dobson's got a question here. What's your time frame from hatch to freezer?
I'm averaging 15 weeks and seeing anywhere from 3.5 pounds up towards sometimes past 4.5 pounds. Because, like I said, we're not eating the very best ones. So some of them are smaller, some are perfect, some are a little bit bigger, which is why they didn't make the cut. Because there is such a thing as too big. You have to keep a overall balance going with them. I've seen a couple of people breed for that size, and it ended up changing the meat to bone ratio, which is another important thing to them. They're supposed to be like a real fine, kind of delicate, graceful bird, like a solid medium. They're not supposed to be massive 12-pound birds when they're a year old. They're supposed to just fall right smack in the middle of the spectrum of chicken, but have like more breast meat, more thigh meat, but on a thinner, delicate bone, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And I think you were one of the first folks I had ever talk about with a breed that was supposed to have more delicate bone structure. I
Yeah, it
think
was the
most,
first I'd ever heard of that. Like, I know in some game birds and things like that, you want like a finer bone, like a more elegant kind of look to them, not like a big, thick-legged Brahma or something along those lines where they're huge. They build this structure up because they're going to become a massive bird.
yeah, I was the first time I heard that, I thought, gee, that's opposite of what most folks with a dual purpose breed go for. They like those big, substantial bones on those birds.
It helps them stay meaty for the duration of growth, which really goes a long way on bringing your processing date earlier rather than later. Because you can find birds that are freezer ready at 14, 15, 16 weeks old, or maybe it's 20 weeks, 24 weeks, all the way up towards 8 months old before their fleshing caught up with their bone growth. Some of them spend a lot of time growing bone. And the American Bresse, the ones we have here, there's some pretty big birds out there that grow that same way, where it's a little bit of a slow burn to get up to the freezer age. Some people do wait past 24 weeks up to 30 weeks just to get the pounds on them. But then at that point, they're not really feed efficient anymore. So by keeping them right where they should be, you get a better feed conversion because they're not doing months of skeletal growth. They're meaty for the whole time. Just pick your age.
Gotcha.
What kind of yield do you want? If they're going to be like 16 weeks, we see a more consistent 4 pound, 4.5 pound. And then up towards 20 weeks, we're looking more at 6 pounds. But by then, the feed conversion is different. And it changes the texture of the meat if they're not capons. Like if they have their male hormones coming in right at 18, 19, 20 weeks, then sometimes rooster coop can get a little chaotic if you have all your boys together at that age.
Mhm.
So I like doing it earlier, right when you haven't just poured feed into them for months and months. Because that was the struggle with a lot of other stuff I tried is, yeah, they eventually got big. Eventually.
How would you classify their temperament?
Oh, it can vary. So I have probably 3 distinct different temperaments in my flock since I have a barn full of them, and they're not all the same family. So I have some really chill, lazy ones. They're trip hazards. They stand at the door waiting on me. They let me just reach down and pet them. Like they're very easygoing, almost like an Orpington or that sort of temperament where they're just easy and chill. And then I have some others who, if I surprise them, they bounce off the walls and they shoot in 50 different directions. And those I'm not crazy about. And then
You know,
there's others that are middle of the road
Yeah.
and average.
and you and I were talking about this earlier today. We were comparing them to another breed. But I think anytime we get birds imported in from another country, it seems like we see these same sort of scenarios. Temperaments are pretty much all over the place. Growth rates are all over the place. I don't know why that is, but we're talking earlier today about Morans, and when they first came over, they were the same way. They were all over the place, and the type was not consistent, but they persevered with them and got them pretty much whipped into shape now. So I'm
It
pretty
took a
sure you
while.
guys can do the same thing with Bresse.
And Rip, in your opinion, how long does it take to really develop a strong family line? How many generations do you need to run through before you can confidently say this group is a family that's predictable, it's consistent? How long does that take?
Oh gosh, Mandelyn, I think that has a lot of dependence upon the quality of the birds you start
Oh,
with. If you've got good sound quality birds, you can get a good family going in 3, 4 years. If you've got a lot of diversity in type and color and weight and growth rates and attitudes, it can take you a while to weed through all of that.
yeah.
I always think of it in terms of decades if it's going to be a real big project. And the American Bresse weren't imported until 2011. So they
Mhm.
haven't been here long enough for that many people to really have those established family flocks where all of the silly recessive traits have been out. They've got all the disease resistance to stuff that's in America, because when birds also get imported, they're carrying immunities for what was in their natural environment. And then you just rock their world and put them halfway around the planet with a brand new list of things that they have to get used to in their environment. So they had to go through that process as well. Initially, there was coccidia sensitivities, and that's still ongoing in some flocks because it's all work in progress. They're pretty new in chicken time.
I'm just gonna throw this out there, but do you think that's related to the birds themselves or related to breeders that have them that are not really aware and tuned in to how to breed for improvement?
I think that's subjective and it depends. And some people are prepared for the project, and others dive in head first and they don't know where they're swimming to yet.
Yeah.
But most of them do start doing research and learning and catching on, and they grow with their flock. Like, a lot of people come out on the other side and go, wow, that was a crash course I wasn't anticipating. I just wanted these birds. But it turns out, no, it's the whole thing. But you get to eat good and you get a basket full of eggs every day. Like, the amount that they lay compared to the harvest yields, like, they really are dual purpose to me.
Yeah. I was just gonna say Sue Dobson says she still has recessives coming out in her calves after 7 years.
Yeah, it might be forever. I don't know.
Yeah.
One
So
Might just
when
be the
you
work of breeding.
when you gave the weights earlier, 3.5, 4 pound, is what does that include? Is that carcass with neck? Is that carcass with
That's
feet
no
and neck?
neck and no gizzards, and I also removed the little tail nub. I take that off too,
You're removing the pope's nose. Why do you do that?
because it looks better in a shrink bag.
Yeah, Jess, don't you know?
Just
Man,
There's oil gland there,
just cut
Some-
out the oil gland.
and then it looks weird.
But
See-
there is really good meat in the pope's nose. Okay.
I
Okay.
feel like they must be
That
fat.
is a delicacy. You're going to offend someone by cutting it off.
Really, should I
Listen,
collect
yeah.
them and deep fry them as a group?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You could
See-
skewer them and do them on the barbecue.
some people breed for the way it looked on 2 feet. Mandy has a large concern for that bag.
Look,
It's a lot of work.
Okay.
She
It's
wants it to
so
look
much
good on
work.
the
By
table.
the time I've got that bird in the kitchen, I need it to be beautiful.
That's right.
there's a huge fat deposit in the tail, and there is a little bit of meat along the spinal cord that extends out into that tail, but there's some flavor profile that you're throwing away. Okay. Just think of it that way. You're giving it to the dogs or something, I realize. But my point being is, my personal opinion, I'm not buying a chicken that's missing the tail. Okay. Ain't happening. Ain't happening, because I got people in my family that go for that piece first, just because of the tenderness of the meat in the tail.
See, I'm that way about the oyster up there on the top of the thigh.
Yeah.
I can't lose those. Those,
Right.
those are premium.
That's the second place some of my family members go, is for the oyster.
That's my first spot. That
Yeah.
little oyster on
So-
either side above the thighs.
Yeah. So anyway, you're talking about a plain carcass, no neck, no heart, no gizzard, no liver. So almost you could pretty much add a pound back to that. So what you're calling 4 pound
Oh,
actually
I
has,
could. I could jam everything back in there in its own bag.
yes. Yeah. But that should make closer to a 5 pound saleable meat. Okay. Because everything you're taking off is part of the package. But yeah, somebody had asked what if that was carcass or live weight, and Carey answered that it was, but I wanted to know what was included in the weights that you were giving.
So generally for live weights, I'm looking for the cockerels to be a minimum of 6 pounds. And
And
sometimes
they should only lose 30%. And that's on the
not if
high
you
side.
take
They
off as
actually
much as
should
I
leave.
do.
Even if you take off the necks and everything else, that should be 30%. Okay, so a 6-pounder, 30% puts it at 4.2 pounds. That should be exactly where you're at, right?
I think in Ohio math, that's where she's at.
Yeah. They do math differently in Ohio. I know that for sure.
We do a lot different in Ohio, okay?
Yes, you do.
New Life in upstate New York says he agrees that the tail and the skin are the best parts.
Oh, I have to cook the skin just a certain way if I'm going to eat the skin too. Otherwise, I save that for the puppies too.
That's my favorite part. Right.
See, you like roasting them. You like slow roasting them. That's your preferred way of doing it. Because
That or smoke. But lately, we've expanded out into chicken tenders, chicken nuggets, ground chicken. I did chicken sausage, which I was surprised about because of the flavor it had plus the seasoning. That was pretty good. And like today, we did some chicken masala, tikka masala, something. My husband cooked today, so I was off the hook. And it was pretty good. Good
I'll
chicken.
tell you what my wife calls it when I cook.
What's
Chef
that?
surprise.
No.
Take out.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So if somebody wants to get started raising this breed, should they start with hatching eggs, baby chicks, started birds, or adults?
Oh, that's tricky. Because while their population is steadily growing and while they're getting more and more popular, they're still spread pretty thin. And in a lot of cases, people are just having to get whatever they can find if they want to
Yeah.
avoid shipping. And most of the shipping is just going to be chicks or eggs. And some folks, they spend a year, 2, 3 years just collecting a flock to get going because they feel like they have to start with a lot of quantity, which you only need that quantity if you're doing chicks or eggs. Cause like you could do pretty good progress on figuring out what you were sent. If you got a box of 100 chicks and you systematically sorted out and looked for their growth rate and who was gaining the best, and you filtered them out leading up towards 6 months old, and then you can come out with a pretty solid breeding stake from that. But if you order 10 chicks, oh, you're gonna be working for a little while because there's like the diversity they have within them in the trade expression. It's like a box of chocolates. So if you can get older proven birds where you're what is what you get, that's good. But then just make sure they're not too old. Make sure they can actually help get you started. And then definitely get your hands on them if you can to feel that they're meaty because there's some floating around that they're not meaty. They didn't have any work done for their growth rate. They didn't have any work done for the fleshing, and they don't feel much different than any other standard medium fowl. But if they're well done and they are layered in the meat, like they've been one of the meatiest purebred birds I've ever put my hands on. But it
Well,
varies and it depends.
how many strains or how many families or how many whatever of the Bresse came over originally? Wasn't there 3 different?
Yeah, so there were
Oh, wow.
3 different ones. 2 of them were similar. One was completely different. And for diversity's sake, they were commingled with each other in a spiral program. So it really made a big change in how many different ways these birds can grow and perform because everything in all 3 of those lines, after you get to that magic 3rd generation of trait chaos in a breeding program, it's exciting if you're right smack in the middle of all of the different variables that can be within the breed. So I use it as an opportunity to learn more about chickens in general and how traits pass forward. And I've turned it into this big breeding experiment, which is teaching me more than I ever knew I needed to know, which is cool.
So Rip and Mandy, does it make sense to accelerate the breeding program and have 2 hatching seasons? So in other words, like you can pretty much have a cockerel at 6 months old and have a pretty good feel for what his genetics are going to do. Should you use artificial lights to stimulate hens to start laying again?
I wouldn't, because they're really supposed to be like a free range, hardy kind of bird. And I think when you start propping them up and babying them and forcing them, like you're going to change stuff about them that might not be positive for the long term. Then you still want to give them time to mature before you really start breeding from them. Like I wait till they're almost a year old before I even start doing test hatches.
It just slows down the process. That's the only thing I'm thinking.
That's how I ended up with a barn full. I have them going in a lot of different ways so that I'm always hatching something.
Now, Mandy, if I remember correctly, during one of the conversations we had, you'd mentioned that you wait till the cockerels are closer to a year old, but you also said something about the egg weight.
Yeah.
Is it 60 or 62 grams, something like that, if I remember right?
That's the general size range, 60 grams. But when I'm doing test hatches from some younger birds, if I have questions I want answered, I'll let 6 grams, 54 grams sneak in there and for the early look for science. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jeff, I did 2 hatches a year for several years, not because I felt like I needed to do it to improve the birds, but I did it because it helped with timing birds for shows.
I just didn't know if you could get a jump start when you're trying to clean up genetics.
I would think you could.
That's what I was thinking. If you know that this rooster, this hen is really consistent and gives you this, and if I took a 20-week or a 24-week-old cockerel from that hatch and put it back on its mother, man, I could bring out a lot of defects to start cleaning up that line in a hurry. Okay. So if you've got that hen rooster pairing that is really consistent and you want to see how purified it is or how consistent it is, coming back and either putting the father on the daughter, and probably do both, but put the father on the daughter and the son on the mother, just to see if you're as good as you thought you were in that previous mating. That you're going to bring out all the ugly in a hurry by doing that.
And I think folks can get a clue when they're getting close to being able to do that when they see their birds starting to look very uniform.
Right. And I don't know if Mandy's there. Right. So I'm not, I'm just trying to think of ways to accelerate cleaning up the breed that other people have really mongrelized and screwed it up in many ways.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of people out there in a hurry to get good Bresse.
You can't rush it.
Yeah.
You can. Some people are always in a hurry. Yeah.
I'm one of those people. This is teaching me to slow down a little bit.
You can do it. Yeah. I really think if you came back son on mother, if you already know that you got this rooster and this hen that are.
Well, I've been doing some of that, and I've done a couple sibling matings to see how fudgy things were in there. And I've got a couple of pens that are a lot better than the other in progress pens.
Well, now, I bet if Mandy got more ruthless than what she already is with her colon, she could do twice a year and wouldn't have an atrocious amount of bird.
I agree.
Maybe.
I agree.
Sometimes I think about doing that. And then I'm like, oh, but I don't want to call myself into a corner. I got to keep the ingredients.
I don't know.
My insurance.
Do you? Some of
I
your
don't want to have to
ingredients.
start over.
Some of your ingredients are already at other farms, so it really wouldn't be that hard to back up a step. So
that's true.
They are at other locations. So it's not like you might back yourself into a corner at your farm, but the ability to get offspring and go back to where you were a year ago wouldn't be that difficult. Because
I would know exactly what I was looking for, and I'd be like, hey, let me come see your 12-week-olds.
Yep.
Hey, Austin wants to know, what is the best time of the year to hatch Bresse? Spring, fall, summer, winter? What do you think?
It depends on the climate. Right now, I'm a big fan of fall hatching because it captures the best layers. Because practically any chicken is going to be laying in the spring. And unless you're trap nesting, you don't exactly know who's who. And I am a fan of small clans and then collecting by the pen. But this time of year, anyone who's not a strong layer is taking a little break. And it's only the troopers that are still an active lay. So
Right.
those eggs I'm finding this time of year, I'm sticking all of those in the incubator because those are my strongest girls making them.
Yep.
So I've got a nice, pretty healthy fall batch. I've got about 100 or so I'm growing. So I think our last processing is going to be right after Thanksgiving. And then I'll take a little break.
Fall hatching is actually, you can do it, and you explain why you're doing it. But I think for most people starting out with them, the spring hatch is probably going to be a lot easier for most people new in their first 2 or 3 years of doing a breeding program. I think the spring hatch is probably a
Well,
better
and the
starting point.
pasture's better and the grow out's better. Like I like to have another group going in to hatch by the end of March or so that by mid-April, they're outside on new grass, taking advantage of the free food.
Yeah,
Oh, mercy.
I like this time of year because you see the ones that are laying, they're dedicated to laying. And I like the vigor that they get from surviving the winter, personally.
That makes perfect sense. And I'm not discouraging anyone listening from doing what you and Mandy are talking about. I'm just saying, for a new breeder who just got breasts, if we go back to Mandy's comment earlier in the show, that people bought breasts because they heard they were a great homesteader meat bird with good lay, right? No experience on breeding. They end up at the end of the year with everything from 2-pounders to 12-pounders, right? And they don't know what they're doing. Okay.
Right.
And I'm not putting them down. They're just new to it. Okay. So as your experience level increases, you can start doing those things. But first or second year breeders, I think I think they're asking for trouble to try and replicate what a seasoned breeder is doing after 7 or 10 years. Okay. That's
Yeah.
my only point, right? Don't start doing that out of the gate because you're going to run yourself into trouble.
On the winter care dynamic too, like you don't want to go into winter buried in extra birds. Like you need to have a plan for sure.
Yep.
It's not the best selling time for the open market either. So my plan is always dinner, so I'm not at the mercy of market swings. I know where the cockerels are going.
And I think a lot of people who are getting the breast, that's exactly their plan as well, right?
Mhm.
It's meat for their family. But hatching much later in the year, if you're in the northern part of the U.S. where the nights are starting to get cold, right? Now you have to have a heating plan. You need a whole other set of infrastructure. So it needs to line up with where you live also, I think.
That is true. Yeah.
So it never gets cold in Alabama. So you're all set.
I put a bird outside in January, December at 5 weeks.
Yeah. And you can do it, right? You may not do that in Ohio.
Yeah, I wait till 7 weeks.
There ain't much grass out there at 7 in the middle of the
No.
winter in Ohio.
No,
So
but they have their feathers. They're a fast
Yes.
feather kind of bird.
That's hybrid
Really?
vigor right there.
Yep. Throw them out there, live or die. All right. Sorry, Rip.
That's
We
all
got
right.
off course.
No, this is all good stuff.
Yeah.
Mandy, one thing I wanted to get you to touch on, and I see it come up a lot in the groups, and particularly on the best group, they have white breasts. And invariably somebody's going to hatch some that have black spots on them. Can
Yeah.
you explain that?
It means they're not homogeneous predominant white and they've got some black sneaking through, which is actually not a terrible problem to have because at least now you know the base color is black and they're not going to yellow out on you and turn orange by having the wrong base color under the dominant white. And you can breed them to where they pick up 2 copies of the dominant white gene and then you get the full coverage right over top of that black on a crispy white feather. Neat. But yeah, black spots aren't a bad problem to have and it's fixable.
But it's not anything to freak out over, y'all. You know
No,
what it
I
is.
freak
and-
out
and
more
you-
over red.
Yes, I would too. And that also, those with red in their background will also be the ones that go brassy.
And I get a little concerned about yellow feet, green feet, yellow beaks, stuff like that. It's hard to know if that's a recessive throwback trait from some of the earlier breeding. Because, like, In Europe, you have to remember both world wars decimated the poultry flocks throughout all of those regions. And there were a lot of breeds that didn't make a comeback, but the Bresse did make a comeback, and they used a couple of helper breeds to boost their commercial qualities in the early 1900s. And some of those probably had yellow feet, and that might sneak out again later. But it's something that I don't retain in my breeding flocks. If I ever see it, I'm like, oh, you're the wrong color. You're going in the freezer. But it's not unheard of. It's just not desirable. But if you look in the history and you look at their work to bring in the commercial lines, which is worth looking up and reading on. Like, I should have brought a link, but their history is pretty interesting.
It is. It really is. So we've got some questions here. Austin Blanchard wants to know, do you have any problem feeding your Bresse in the hotter part of the year?
No. Mine tend to camp out a little more in the barn because it's shaded, and I have very deep sand closer to their pop doors. Like, it's got to be a good 8 inches thick because of how my barn steps down with the concrete. I just filled it with sand. So they'll dig down and hang out there in the afternoon. Then they get up and go eat. They go through less feed because they are being lazier, but there hasn't been any significant changes. But our heat's not too terrible either. We rarely cross over 100 degrees. The humidity will cross 100 for sure. It'll
Yeah.
feel like 105, but it's not too bad.
And he also wanted to know if there is, here we go. Is there a difference in meat quality in white as opposed to black or gray Bresse?
There's going to be some small little differences, but nothing major. If they're Bresse, they ought to have the marbling gene for their fat development, and that is a recessive trait, as it turns out. So you want to avoid the outcrosses because they're not going to have the same fat development as the purebred birds will have. But as far as flavor, that's going to be the same. The finishing influences the end result as well. So if you have a black Bresse and a gray Bresse, and the black Bresse got specially finished, the gray Bresse did not, how do you know where that difference is? Was it the bird or the finishing? So to really test it out, you'd want to do a side by side where everybody gets the same and then see what the results are. But I don't think there's significant difference. Like, my 3 different groups of whites, they're all pretty similar for their table traits and flavor and fat development. So it should be the same in the other types, I would think.
That makes sense. What about weather hardiness for your birds? Do they have a problem with temperature extremes?
They tend to handle heat pretty well, mostly because so many of them tend to have oversized combs, like massive combs. Some of that is because they were bred to have them. Like, it wasn't a consideration in the breeding program to have absolutely massive combs. And that's okay in Arizona because it helps them release heat. But when those birds have those giant combs and they head to Alaska, it's going to be a problem. But birds are adaptable too. So the second generation you have, if you're in a northern climate, they're going to start evolving to that climate the longer you have them as well. And buying into a flock that's already in the north, that already had time to start getting acclimated, that's helpful too. Because there's people with them in Utah, Minnesota, and they're getting through winter. Some people have special considerations with their housing. Like, for us in Ohio, we have the big barn that it has lungs, it breathes. And if we're going to get sustained temperatures below freezing, I don't do that much different. But if we have sustained sub-zero, I'll go wrap the pens in plastic to help hold in a little more heat. And I won't heat the water because it'll bump the humidity.
Thank you for joining us this week. Before you go, make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you can receive new episodes right when they're released, and they're released every Tuesday. And if you're enjoying this podcast, we'd like to ask you to drop us an email at poultrykeepers@gmail.com and share your thoughts about the show. Thank you again for joining us for this episode of the Poultry Keepers Podcast. We'll see you next week.